Welcome back to Definitely Not Definitive. I'm Ken.
And I'm Bethany.
We're just a fantastic couple in love that loves reacting to some Fallout.
We do.
Yeah, and so we're on to season 2 now. And this is season 2, episode 1, Boomers and Vault 34, and also episode 2, The Pit.
Ooh.
So yeah, we'll watch one and we'll talk about it, and then we'll watch the next one. If you want all of our Fallout reactions, check out the description of this video, because we got a playlist there for you. We got a link to our Patreon. Also, we can get early ad-free access to our videos. And because it's Fallout,
we have a drink.
Yep.
It's the Stimpack Spritzer, which I am not going to attempt to hold right now because I have a very wild dog in my lap.
But I'm going to do it.
He's going to do it. So it's got the Stimpack, which is awesome. I'm going to be doing my Stimpack.
And you mix it up.
Off camera.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Ooh, new intro. Okay. So what you doing, Shottycast?
Wasteland Survival Guide.
Robco presents Tomorrow's Technology Today. The world is a dull place with billions of boring people. Not you, though. You're interesting. You're special. A unique and beautiful snowflake.
Oh, God.
Why deprive the world of your obvious genius? We all should know what you're doing.
Oh, God.
At all times. Whether you're walking your dog in the park,
Oh, nut
like
it.
a slice of cake. Turn your obvious loneliness into somebody else's problem. Capture it all with the latest in ego-boosting technology. Edna, the iBot documentary narrative assistant. Gone are the days of privacy. You'll have privacy when you're dead. Share your life with your friends. Order yours today. Our sales bots are standing by.
Okay.
That was great. That was one of the best ones.
Now testing iBot documentary narrative assistant. Say hello, Edna.
Cool.
Begin recording,
Wow.
Edna. You and I have a wasteland to explore. Damn it, the red light isn't on. Oh, there isn't one. Well. Wasteland Survival Guide, Volume 1.
They say an armed society is a polite society. If that's true, then Vault 34 had to be the most polite place on Earth. Back in 2077, when the bombs fell, the folks at Vault Tech wanted to see what happens when far too many people got squeezed into tight quarters with way too many guns. Vault 34 was the petri dish for that little experiment, and after keeping people cooped up in there for a century, the place turned into a powder keg of paranoia, overpopulation, and high explosive etiquette.
High explosive etiquette.
Outside the entrance to the vault, it's a ways east of New Vegas, in an inhospitable spot in the hills.
There's a truckload of atomic waste parked right in front. The only thing that dares to come near the geckos.
Yeah.
Oh, he's licking his eyeball.
They won't be a problem, though.
Yeah.
Jeez.
The way he runs.
Oh.
Cute till he blasted him.
The radiation levels are lethal inside and out, so virtually no one has ventured inside, and the last people to leave did so over 50 years ago.
Oh, dear.
Inside the vault is nothing
Twitching?
but feral ghouls and radioactive water. Most of the computer records are damaged, but before the overseer ghoulified, he left behind written journals of what happened. Vault 34 seemed like it would be a great place to wait out the apocalypse. Vault Tech had equipped it with extravagant recreational and fitness centers, much more elaborate than other vaults. But making room for that full-size swimming pool meant removing some of the living quarters. Every vault came with a small stockpile of weapons for a security team. They had to keep the peace among 1,000 people who were cooped up together for anywhere from 10 to 200 years.
Oh, my God.
Most of them only had a handful of small arms, but Vault 34 got the sort of arsenal that could have turned the tide at the Battle of Anchorage. Grenade launchers, missiles, prototype energy weapons. Not the sort of thing you'd want to use in the confined space of a vault, and nary a lock in sight. The overseers knew that 1,000 people armed with 40mm peacemakers wasn't a good idea, so they figured out how to lock it up and keep it under guard. But that only kept the peace for a few generations. Eventually, the overcrowding became so great that a group of vault dwellers stormed the armory, stole most of the bigger guns, and headed out into the Mojave. Folks around the Mojave called them the Boomers, and it ain't hard to see why. They emerged from Vault 34 with stars in their eyes and missile launchers on their shoulders around 2231.
Yep.
After blowing up every tribe they came across, they eventually discovered Nellis Air Force Base to the east. None of the pre-war aircraft were still functional, but the Boomers found records on other nearby military bases, and soon enough they had added giant guns called howitzers to their collection, hauled all the way from the Hawthorne Army Depot in Arizona. They had stockpiled enough ordnance to level a town several times over.
And anyone dumb enough to set foot in it for the next 50 years.
Let's go sunning, it's so good for you. Let's go sunning.
Ooh.
The sky of blue, greet the sun every morn. Feel as free and happy as the day you were born. Let's go native, sun your cares away, be creative.
The rare person who could observe the patterns
Right in the
the
face?
blitzkrieg and move fast enough to make it inside the base will find Nellis to be one of the garden spots of the Mojave. They pipe in fresh water from Lake Mead. They grow their own crops and have a set of solar panels that give them electricity without having to worry about who's controlling the Hoover Dam.
Cool.
They have a museum dedicated to their history and a tyke who's happy to tell it to anyone who will listen to the whole story. And if the child's cave painting isn't detailed enough, their leader is a woman who was born inside the vault and remembers the whole thing firsthand. She's done right by her people for the last 50 years and was probably quite the looker in her day. Despite Mother Pearl's guidance, the Boomers
Mother
are still
Pearl.
some of the most xenophobic people in the wasteland, convinced that it's their destiny to blow up all of us savages once they get a bomber flying. They have a plan that they don't like to discuss with outsiders, but if you earn the trust of the old-timers, they'll talk about a lady of the lake. It might be that they have some superstition about that rusty pre-war bomber that's sitting at the bottom of Lake Mead. So far, the Boomers have done well with their isolationism, but their resources are still limited. And much like the Brotherhood of Steel, they may face only a slow death should their population and ammo dwindle. The people who stayed behind back in Vault 34 learned their own lesson about isolationism. Their overseers refused to let anyone leave, and the many attempts to revolt eventually resulted in the vault's reactor malfunctioning, and that swimming pool flooded most of the place, trapping them all inside a radioactive swamp. The remnants of their vast arsenal await anyone brave enough to wade through the radioactive waters and fight past the feral ghouls. It's an enticing treasure trove for prospectors who have plenty of Rad-X stockpiled and who need to compensate for something.
Too many people these days are concerned with blowing things up. Few folks wonder how it all got built in the first place. Those airplanes, the hangars, the vaults, all were made with steel.
In the old days, they dug their iron from deep within the earth, refined it into steel in huge mills, unlike anything still standing in New California, and used it to make the steel girders that held up the old world. Today, there's only one place that can still do that. It's hard labor, and the people who do it aren't exactly there for the satisfaction of an honest days.
Oh shit.
But that
It's a story for another day.
Cool.
I love how he's talking to us now. That shot where like we're around the fire with him, and it's like, oh, we're now in this story instead of being like the spectators. I don't know. It just felt like there was an added layer of us being in there now.
Yeah, I agree. I like the way this is formatted. I do miss the old intro.
I do too.
It was really just gets you pumped up. But like, I get it. They're trying to get into it a little bit quicker. And it's like, the short attention spans of people today, and like, even when this was made, whatever, like 8 years ago. People are just like, intros get shorter and shorter, and like, people just ditch it, and it's like, okay, we gotta get right to it. Like, we can't, if we get less of the intro, then we can get more meat of the story. But I do like the format. I like how they, first of all, the after like their intro, the actual little, like, we were talking about Edna.
Yeah.
That was hilarious, and it was a cool setup for how we're going to be following the storyteller throughout this.
Yeah, I completely agree. I loved the moment of like, people are boring, but not you. You're interesting. I just like, it was so great. And
Yeah.
some nice little social commentary there about where we are as a society now. I mean, with influencers and everything else, it's like, Yeah, that's kind of where it's at in a very exaggerated form.
Yep. And then also like when you sit around the fire and like people are too obsessed with like blowing stuff up. I'm like, yeah, yeah, they are. That is true as well.
Yeah, also very true.
Okay. So we're gonna go on to episode 2 in season 2, The Pit.
See, I thought this was just going to be an intro
Before,
for Shoddy Cast.
yeah.
I still thought we were going to get our intro.
Me too. I did as well.
But we did not.
Meet Joe. Joe is a new recruit in the United States Army.
Hey,
And
Joe.
like any dutiful American, he wishes to serve his country by shooting up the bad guys. Do we throw Joe on the front lines and hope he figures it out himself? Nonsense. That would be a waste of a perfectly good suit of power armor. Through the use
Not
of
a person,
taxpayer
but a suit.
money, and with the aid from what the eggheads are calling virtual reality, Joe can break the chains of his physical form and experience war from the comfort of a cozy pod. Into the pod steps a starry-eyed American, and out comes a killing machine, a defender of liberty, a guardian of democracy.
Oh my God.
Now Joe's a true American hero. You can be too. Enlist in the United States Army and experience virtual reality today.
Edna, begin recording. The Mojaves had to worry about slavers from the Legion capturing folk. But at least when you're grabbed by the Legion, you know where you're heading.
Out east in the capital wasteland, there are plenty of slavers, but it seems like there aren't many slaves around. People always wonder what happens to the unfortunates who get nabbed. But it turns out that the slavers in Paradise Falls are in the export business. When they capture someone, they usually aren't sold locally. They get shipped north to a place aptly named the Pitt. Before the war, the Pitt was called Pittsburgh in the Eastern Commonwealth. The Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce produced some interactive holotapes to draw in tourists and show off its thriving steel industry. This is what it looked like in the late 21st century. There aren't many records of what the city was like in the years following the Great War. No reliable sources entered the Pit until about 30 years ago, when a Brotherhood of Steel chapter led by Paladin Lions passed through on their mission to explore the East Coast. When they arrived, it looked more like this. While the West Coast was slowly marching back towards civilization, Pittsburgh had spent 180 years degenerating into a genetic swamp with barely human mutants cannibalizing each other.
Yeah.
Different parts of the wasteland get their own local flavor. In the Pit, the unique combination of radioactive runoff and industrial waste brought about what they call troglodyte degeneration condition. Anyone who stays in the Pit will start to develop it after a few weeks. Most people just get a case of ghouly-looking skin, but many lose their higher cognitive abilities eventually. The most unfortunate folk devolve one step further and lose their humanity altogether. These trogs, as they call them, crawl around naked on all fours and shun humanity in favor of the shadows.
When the Brotherhood of Steel traveled through the Pit in 2255, Elder Lyons couldn't stand seeing humanity reduced to such a state, so he and his followers annihilated most of the cannibals, the raiders, and mutants.
Run! 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 Firing!
Oh. Vaporized.
Yeah.
The Brotherhood called it the Scourge. They brought fire and brimstone to hell, sacked the city, and took what unmutated children they found with them to Washington, D.C. A few of those Pit kids are now full members of the Brotherhood's capital chapter. The Brotherhood also left someone behind in the Pit, a paladin who had been wounded and trapped during the Scourge, Ishmael Asher. Paladin Asher was a local brother at one point, but when awoke, surrounded by raiders in the ruins of the Pit, he saw a city that held promise. Pittsburgh had once been called the City of Steel, and Asher knew that the secrets of steel would let the wasteland rebuild America's railways. Noble goals indeed, but the business of forging iron ore into girders of steel is hard work. Hard even during the height of civilization, and even worse now. Given that people who spend more than a few weeks in the pit end up turning into troglodytes, it's not surprising that there weren't many volunteers. The dwindling population of the pit had to be inflated with slaves, so Asher has been importing his labor force from the capital wasteland. Slaves need a motivation, a reason to not just lie down and let the trogs tear their throats out. For the slaves in the pit, their hope is the Hole, a combat arena where the brave can try to prove themselves worthy of freedom by brawling in a crater filled with radioactive sludge. Survive 3 rounds against the most bloodthirsty people in the pit. You're free to go with an offer of joining Asher's army. The gentleman's art of boxing has no place in the Hole. Slaves fight with anything they can get their hands on, from mining equipment to laser scatterguns. One person even won their freedom using a board with a nail in it.
Lucille.
Very few people actually make it out of the pit, though. One person fought their way free through the Hole and showed up in the capital wasteland a few years ago, carrying holotapes that were supposedly recorded by Paladin Asher himself. If it's really him, it seems that he had been trying to find a cure for the trog condition, yet more noble aspirations from a slave owner. Folk who want to see how things turned out can take a hand truck there from northern Maryland. The rails go all the way up to the pit. No matter your opinion on slave owning, that's quite a feat of engineering, and a testament to the potential of Asher's vision of a reborn world.
There's a chance that future generations will actually restore the railways that once connected both coasts of this continent. Getting across the oceans is another story. A few folk with funny accents claim that they're from overseas, but ships that can navigate the water spouts and sea critters are nearly impossible to find.
There's a fella who says his old paddle boat could travel up and down the Atlantic coast, but the farthest anyone has ever gone and returned is a swamp a little ways to the south. It's a place of mysteries and ancient magics, or at least that's what you'll hear from the few tourists who've been there and back.
Whoa.
But that is a story for another day.
Yes, it is.
That was very disturbing. Fallout often has disturbing stories.
Yeah.
But I don't know, there's just something about like the creepy, cannibalistic, naked ghouls running around and like the way that they ran. It's like, I don't know, it's like it's come up in horror movies a lot in more recent years, that like freaky way when the scary possessed person gets down on like all fours and moves in a way that humans shouldn't move. And that's just kind of what it made me think of.
Clever to try to start up the railways again, and good way to get the trade going. And if you can control that, that would make you pretty powerful as well. But of course, kind of like what he said. Like what sprung up to my mind was when he was like, "Oh, despite your views on slavery, you have to admit that what this built is pretty impressive." I'm like, yeah, the pyramids are very impressive, and they're they built by slaves, and so. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a point there. It just that's something that made me think about.
Well, I think it's because the sort of what's the word I'm trying to say here? The assumption that he's making is that the two cannot be mutually exclusive.
Yeah, but
they can be. Like the pyramids can both be awesome and built in a horrifying way. Like that the two can coexist in the same world.
Yeah. That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
I think that's what I was saying. I'm like, what's my point here? I don't really know what my point is. That's what made me think of, but I think you summed it up well.
So I thought it was really cool, the whole idea of they put the soldier into the virtual reality to train them. As you all know, I've commented on virtual reality in the past several times, but I just read something today that was super interesting, which is that they're trying to design a suit that you can wear when you are wearing your virtual reality, like headgear or whatever, that will then allow you to not only be fully immersed visually and auditorily, but also through the sensation of touch.
Cool.
So this suit that you would wear on your body is designed to respond the way that your avatar is responding in the environment, so that you will actually feel the impact on your muscles of certain things and whatnot to give you that even further immersed experience.
That's like Ready Player One kind of stuff in there when he gets the suit, the full body suit or whatever, and he wins that prize. Wow. So yeah, the future is now.
It's gonna be crazy.
Let us know what you thought about this down below in the comments. And if you want all of our Fallout reactions, check out the description of this video because we got a playlist there for you. We also have a link to our Patreon and get early ad-free access to our videos.
Yay. Yay.
Thanks so much for checking out our reaction for the for the Storyteller Fallout Season 2, Episode 1 and 2, but just keep in mind
That our reaction is definitely not definitive.